Fan service, or service cut, is material in a work of fiction or in a fictional series that is intentionally added to please the audience. Here I'll cover Picard Season 3, the proposed Star Trek Legacy show, and for the purposes of this discussion I'll also include the non-canonical entry of OTOY's recent short film, Unification. Before going further, it's worth acknowledging that good entertainment is a difficult thing to make. Star Trek even more so given the constraints, much less the chops it takes to do it well. Evidence of that exists in the early seasons of most of its series that are notably hit and miss as the writers explore new characters and their new circumstances. Writing good Star Trek is a narrow path that few can walk. The Picard Manoeuvre. I, like many others, was extremely surprised to see Robert Meyer Burnett and others on the lead up to the release of Picard Season 3 be filled with near unreserved praise for the project. How could a third helping of a series that had produced relentlessly unwatchable servings of a show that seemed specialised and dedicated to misunderstanding not only Star Trek, but the basic cause of entertainment on every level it is possible to conceive of? Would we really be getting something that cast grins back on the faces of besmirched trekkies? RMB himself clearly had some early access that dated back at least a full year prior to its debut. His occasional mentions of it were intriguing, but I had been burned too many times to be optimistic. And to summarise my experience, I would use one word: overrated. Yes, it means well. Yes, there is respect for characters that was sorely lacking in other projects, but I can't give it a pass on those elements alone. To put it bluntly, Picard Season 3 is fan fiction. It has its moments that I will give credit to, but they are unfortunately few and far between. Otherwise, it's a hyped up, superficial fan wank of a show. Imagining if the baddies from DS9 got together with the Borg Queen and they turned all the kids into drones via pirate radio. Like Eddie Murphy once said,
"If you're starving and somebody throw you a cracker, you're gonna be like this. Goddamn, that's the best cracker I've ate in my life."
In this case, I believe a fan base so starved of anything resembling a once great show saw what they wanted to see due to the abusive levels of poor Trek they'd been fed prior. There were some nice moments, even if the execution was a bit clunky, such as giving closure to Ro Laren, bringing back Data by having a reconciliation with Lore, the return of Shelby, even if it was only for a few moments, but for me, most of it was painful. The cumbersome reveal that Jack is Picard's son, the rehash of "I was at Wolf 359, look, this is where the space jellyfish from Encounter at Farpoint came from," characters not acting like themselves for some cheap drama, such as Riker saying to Picard, "You just killed us all." Another was the inclusion of Raffi. After making the common sense move of jettisoning all the other characters from the previous two seasons, why in the world would you keep her, the worst of them? Throw in the oh so tiresome overuse of the Borg and the Enterprise flying around like an X-Wing, some really cringe dialogue, and we got what we got, a largely superficial nerd fever dream, flying drunk at Warp 9. In saying why he thought the season was more like a movie and less like TNG Season 8, writer-director Terry Matalas alludes to its lack of intellectual depth in an interview.
If you were going to do Season 8, it would be a different kind of storytelling. It would be more of an intellectual, not less serialized.
Bar a couple of minor glimpses, this barely scratches the surface of being Star Trek for me. It's nice that someone who cared got their hands on the reins for a minute, but ultimately, as I set out, making good entertainment is hard, making Star Trek, much less good Star Trek, is much harder. More, I think this would be obvious if Picard Season 3 had been the first release from the Secret Hideout era. If we'd seen this before our expectations were lowered through the floor with Discovery in the first two seasons of Picard, I think it would have been rejected wholesale as what it is, fan fiction, not fan service. Certainly not anything approaching good Star Trek. So, put simply, I don't want to see any more of this kind of thing. and I don't want its potential continuation in Star Trek Legacy. A man cannot dine on crackers alone. OTOY's recent Unification short film was a well-composed, heartfelt homage to the original series mainstays of Kirk and Spock, reuniting them for a final tender moment. After viewing for the first time, I wrote this tweet that summarised my view. It read, "I love the respect and reverence running through this. Clearly a labour of love, but I just want Star Trek to get on with it. The next generation. It's stuck in the worst case scenario of no respect, no talent, and no future at the moment." You may notice the account that liked this tweet belongs to Carlos Baena, the director of Unification. Of course, I don't know if Carlos agrees 100% down the line with this. It seems just as likely he was engaging to show gratitude to a fan for acknowledging the good intentions that went into it. OTOY's efforts are technological marvels. I can well imagine that anyone doing as they have done being very nervous not to kick a hornet's nest of fan angst by delving back into the past in the way they've done. It is good, it is tasteful, it is respectful, but ultimately I moved on from this a long time ago. As I said before in my previous video, we don't need reboots, we don't need prequels, and to that list you can add technologically resurrected fan favourite characters for one last moment. These characters have served their duty.
We've done our bit for King and Country.
Thank you Carlos and OTOY, but it's time to let them rest. How to truly serve as fans. So, what do we as Star Trek fans want? How can Secret Hideout or any future production company service us fans? Yes, we love the legacy characters. The stars aligned. They were well conceived, well cast, had great chemistry, and were in fantastic stories. But their stories have been told, and we have said our goodbyes. Star Trek VI is the perfect ending for the TOS crew. The fact that some appeared in later installments doesn't change that for me. It is unfortunate that TNG didn't get similar care with the big screen goodbye. However, it is notable that they got, in my opinion, the best ending of any of the TV shows. All good things brought the TNG story full circle. Back to the trial of humanity, with Judge Q ready to push Picard one last time to think outside the box. Just as the show's writers were always made to do in order to elevate their work in the best traditions of Star Trek, ending with a poignant moment that brought Picard closer to his shipmates, closing the loop perfectly. It gave us an original story driven by the creative sci-fi device of anti-time, a concept that blew my young mind at the time. It was smart, bold, and pandered to no one. That was one truly for the fans. That's when the writers knew their audience. And that's what I want now. Moments that blow me away, interesting concepts, thoughts I've never had before, dilemmas presented in a new and interesting way. Moments on par with the first time we saw Q, the first time we encountered the Borg, the time we saw Picard battle a modern witch hunt. I want great sci-fi concepts like non-linear time, used not only to drive elements of the story, but also demonstrate how psychologically our minds drift untethered backwards and forwards, revisiting our memories and anticipating our futures, sometimes dwelling on our pain and prolonging our suffering, all at the cost of failing to connect with the present moment. I want the introduction of provocative new technologies, like the first time the EMH was activated. I want the excellent stories that followed from the circumstantial requirements of his expertise versus his blunt impersonal manner that provoke questions of whether he should be programmatically altered. I want the brilliant stories that followed from these and all the other inspired creative moments in Star Trek. This is the tradition of Star Trek. We need people who could follow that. Mushroom drives, pessimism, F-bombs, the zany tribute cartoons, none of that is cutting it for me. True fan service for this Trekkie starts there.